Welcome to a live session this month on Prpoi, the award-winning platform for upskilling in public relations. Thank you for joining us today for this session. I'm your host, Tarunjit Ratan, and I'm delighted to welcome you to a discussion today on an intriguing subject that has been brewing in the world of PR for some time now. If you're joining us for the first time, know that PRPOI is a free platform that is dedicated towards upskilling the entire PR community and discovery of strong new voices in the community that can give us straight answers, help us all grow stronger together. If you are a regular viewer, then thank you again for joining us. We appreciate all the comments, questions you add to the conversation. Well, then let's dive into our topic for the panel today, building narratives for change via PR. In PR, we love storytelling. And if you think about it, we are all made of stories that form our dominant narratives. But how are we harnessing narratives for social change? And is it truly possible? Can we bring out a change in the status quo through the power of PR? Our panel today is going to share real world examples of how PR can harness the power of narrative building and enabling change for good. And to host this discussion today, we are joined by Dr. Varsha Pillai. Let me first add her to the panel. Hi, Varsha.
Hi, good morning.
So a little bit about Varsha before I hand over the panel to her. Now, Dr. Varsha has over 2 decades of experience in the media and communication domain, both in the profit and not-for-profit sector. In the development communication space, she specializes in media, public policy initiatives. Her sustained interest in research continues as she was selected as NFAI, that is National Film Archives of India Research Fellow in 2009. Followed by Netherlands Fellowship in 2017. In 2019, she was selected among 10 young leaders globally for the Winter School for Think Tankers in Geneva as part of the Think Tank Initiative Fellowship. More recently, in 2020, she was selected as a change maker by Change.org India 2022. She also holds a PhD on gender advocacy in digital media in India, which she completed in 2022, and currently heads narrative building and communication at Dream a Dream India since April 2020. Wow, Varsha, that's quite a resume.
Thank you.
Interestingly, Dr. Varsha was one of our first panelists on PRPOI when we started the live sessions. So good to have you back with us today as a guest host. And before I hand over the discussion over to Varsha, I would like to thank all of you again for joining us. You can watch our monthly live sessions on engaging conversations on PR now on our pages on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and keep those questions coming. Let's keep the conversation alive. Over to you, Varsha. So I'm going to.
Thank you so much, Tarunjit. And it's an honor being here. And we have a fantastic panel ahead joining us. But before we start, right, when we talk about narratives, we're all made of stories, just like Tarunjit mentioned. But how do we make meaning out of those? And how are those stories making us make sense of what is happening around in the world? And joining me today are individuals and really people making change and making meaning of those changes that are happening in our social sector, as well as in the field of communications, are individuals who've been working and building narratives even as I speak. So firstly, I will be welcoming all the panelists one by one. So please welcome Antara from Gnothi Seauton, and I hope I'm saying that right. And next up, and next up is Sahana from Rohini Philanthropies Foundation. Hi.
Hi, Varsha. Hi, nice to be here. Thank you.
And then we have Girish, and here he is from On Purpose. He's a founder of On Purpose. So before I actually introduce you all, right, to the panel, to everybody, to our audience here, I'd actually want all of you to share your own personal journey briefly in this particular vibrant space of communications and narrative building. Antara, you can start off.
Sure. Thank you, Varsha. I'm really happy to be here today. So I have about a decade of experience in the communication space, and I've been part of the agency world for about a little over 5.5 years now. From the beginning, most of my clients have been in the social impact sector, and I've worked with clients, ranging from education, healthcare, disability, even things like palliative care, a really wide sort of range of clients. So through and primarily my input has been in the digital and content spaces and events and stakeholder engagement spaces. So yeah, I'm really excited to kind of have this conversation and get insights from everyone today.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Antara. Sahana?
Yeah, thanks, and nice to meet you, Antara. I have 8 years. I have over 13 years of experience in the communication space. I also started 8 years in the corporate sector, and over the last 5 years is when I moved to the actually 6 odd years when I moved to the social sector, and I was very unpleasantly shocked at how different communications is in the corporate space as opposed to in the impact space, because I was working with NGOs as a freelance consultant. Currently, I work at a foundation primarily looking at how do we build the storytelling capacity and the storytelling emotions within CSOs, and how can we all instill a communications of culture, culture of communications, a communications culture basically in this space. So thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Sahana. Yes, Girish.
Thank you. I'm really privileged to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think with a very rich and diverse set of experience on this panel. I myself have got I had 19 years of corporate experience before I went through my own sort of crisis of purpose. And I started on purpose as a sort of, uh, as an attempt to find my own purpose in life, which was where I realized that I really enjoy communications, but I wanted to use it to do something good. And today I'm really pleased because I've also found many other people who want to do similar things, who enjoy communications and want to focus on social change. So today, On Purpose works in climate action, public health, education, and gender. And I'm so happy because I could not have chosen better areas to work. They're very contentious, they need a lot of work, and I think we are still learning. It's a very complicated space. The nuances of the sector, the stakeholders involved, requires a lot of patience, a lot of listening, and I think we're a work in progress.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for sharing your own journeys into the space of communication briefly. So let's start, right? What does narrative building or building narratives for change mean to you personally? So maybe this time we'll start with you, Bala, since you ventured and you have this great organization called On Purpose with this whole idea of, moving into change communications and creating a change on the ground. So what does building narratives for change mean to you personally?
In a lot of ways, it's getting people to take notice, and people don't take notice if you're communicating the same vanilla messages in the same way in which they're used to receiving those messages. So in a lot of ways, narrative building is trying to find an insight or something that is deeply personal to people, something that is almost visceral, that makes you look at the world in a different way and makes you go, I hadn't thought about it in this way. And when you do that, then suddenly you're able to sort of reframe your own consciousness of the world and the issue that you're trying to sort of engage with. So, from a personal perspective, I think uh, campaign building is one part of narrative building. But what I'm realizing working in the development sector is that the consumer outreach is only one component. There are so many other stakeholders that need to be addressed. Policymakers, of course, are a key audience, and at the end of the day, no matter how much demand you create with consumers, if you're not able to sort of get policymakers to take notice and make a change, it doesn't last. So I'm going to say that for me personally, narrative building it's an exercise in creating an emotional connect with an audience, but then also strategically thinking through the different stakeholders who need to be taken along this journey so that we're able to achieve what I would call systemic change, generational change. And it's not the sort of thing that you can do in a year and say, hey, here are my results, and look what we achieved.
Yeah, so that's where the aspect of insight is what you shared made a lot of sense, because only those insights will actually help us move forward. Is it somewhere the same for you, Sahana, when we are talking about bringing in this kind of insight into building narratives for change, especially since you come with corporate sector experience, and you said that you were a little bit shocked with the way the development sector communications functions happen?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, building on what Bala said, it is about the people, right? I think when it comes to narrative building, one of the first questions that appealed to me was, what are we saying by not saying? Who are we excluding by just including a particular approach, by adopting a particular approach? Like, for example, in the corporate sector, if you're doing media relations, it is about promotion, it is about building brand building, it is about telling the world, hey, I have a product. But in the corporate sector, the product is always very amorphous. You can't really say behavior change is a product, or taking on a particular nutrition package is a product, because it involves understanding the context of the people that we are talking to. So narrative building becomes a lot about listening, which I think Bala very nicely spoke about in the beginning. Is about a lot about listening. It's about understanding the nuances of the people and kind of making them, they're not consumers, right? They are people who are sharing a pain. They are people who can kind of who are dealing with the everyday struggles, perhaps, or not able to find their own platform to raise their own voices, because solutions often exist there. So for me, narrative building is very much about public participation. It is about making knowledge or what you're offering accessible, and kind of building the capacity to transform them, to adopt that narrative, make it their own, or even actually more than adopting the narrative, finding their own narrative and making it their own, kind of finding a way to practice it. So yeah, that is what I would say narrative building is my learning has been.
Yes, so it also is about, and a big aspect of that I hear from you, Sahana, is the unlearning aspect of it, right? What, where, and right, like we move not from consumers, we move to people, because they are actually facing real world issues, even as we are, trying to find solutions for them. So Antara, when we come to bringing about the agency perspective to this, because when the client comes to you and says that this is the change that we want to see, and this is the this is the landscape that you have, there are multiple stakeholders. How does narrative how can we build narrative that meets that kind of purpose, which is really huge? Like Bala said, it's going to take
Yeah,
ages for it to
it's not
change.
done in a day. Yeah. Yeah, so I think Sahana and Girish have spoken about a lot of things that I had in mind, but one thing that I wanted to bring up, which is sort of our methodology at Gnothi Seauton, is we sort of what we kind of define the work that we do as purposeful storytelling. So what we felt sort of from the beginning and how we operate is that it's very easy to make a noise, right? Like you put a certain amount of money into something, you can make a noise very easily, but how are you kind of ensuring that something is sticking in people's minds? How is it like, because today, and especially in a country like India, and when we're talking about narrative building for change, there is no dearth of causes that you want people to know about. Even if you're taking something like education, or if you're taking something like healthcare, there are 5,000 things in each of these that you want people to know about. So uh, sort of going from just creating awareness, which is sort of the first step and a very important step, but then building a kind of connection with your stakeholders, persuading them to, be kind of persuading them to relate to your cause in some way, and then driving them to action, and whatever action you really want different stakeholders to take. So, like Girish said, with a policymaker, the action could be, something at a much larger legislative level. With the end beneficiary, it could be something like, just signing up for a particular program for, for a talent, or like if you're hiring for that cause, so for everyone the call to action is going to be different. But how are you going to really move beyond just saying we are doing great work, this is the importance of the cause, and building that kind of connection that you get those people to take action? I think that's the challenge that lies with agencies today, because I think maybe even 4 or 5 years ago, it was okay to just have a social media account and put out 3 posts a week and do, one press release a quarter, and you're kind of like done on your deliverables. But I don't think that that's the world we live in anymore. So you have to kind of adapt to that and see what people are responding to better and what's going to ultimately move the needle for the client, when you're looking at it from an agency perspective.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you brought up about we've moved beyond quantitative metrics of seeing how campaign measurement happens. Yes, it is part of it, and we should not lie about that. It is there. You are going to be sharing that to your clients. But truly, how difficult is it to build a narrative, like we said, for any particular social change cause? And why are those skills of listening really important? Because oftentimes we assume certain things, and we because those may be the dominant narratives then. But like Bala and Sahana have shared, there are multiple layers to this, right? So coming from a space of building the narrative, how important is listening an aspect of creating a compelling narrative? So Sahana, if you want to go for that.
Yeah, I think I'll start with I'll answer that with an example. And Varsha, your experience with Dreamer Dream itself is quite valuable. So we would love to hear from you as well. So one of our partners is called Civis, and they work in public consultation. So basically, the government puts out these laws and they say, give us your feedback. So first of all, the platform is online and the dominant language is English. So now say, for example, if it's on labor or if it's on migration, how are we expecting the people who are actually impacted by migration, the laborers who come from, say, Bihar to Kerala, to have a voice in this, right? So if you're saying the narrative building is to kind of influence policies to matter to the people who it's impacting the most, then how do you kind of uh, uh, make, uh, make it possible for them to share their own opinions or their views on what the policy should be? And what Civis basically did was they tied up with Gramvani, which is a mobile IBRS platform, to translate the policy into regional languages. So they translated this into regional languages, went on ground to migration to sites where these laborers from different parts of India come, use the phone IVRS to say, hey, because it's just you give a missed call and that channel kind of plays. It's called Mobile Money. And then they kind of told them certain parts, not the entire 500 pages, or even if it's 25 pages, certain clauses that matter. And then they took their opinions, they audio recorded it, because again, it's important that they can't type it on a platform. So how do you really give them avenues, right? So they audio recorded it, and then Civis translated these multiple thoughts that have come in, and then on behalf of them, gave their opinions. They're not experts, because we often have experts from Ivy League colleges who have studied migration kind of giving their opinion, but the lived experiences of migrant workers, migrant laborers, how do you kind of enable them, empower them, and give them the agency to do that? Similarly with climate change, they did something called and I urge our readers to look up, they have a climate voices handbook which they have done in Marathi, Hindi, Tamil, and they use multiple avenues, website in multiple languages, community radio, because a lot of these tier 3 towns still use community radios, media coverage in multiple languages to impact policymakers, community partnerships, so that you might be an NGO sitting in Bangalore or Bombay, but what about somebody in Kolkata, and somewhere like in Diamond District of Kolkata, like a Diamond Harbor in Kolkata? How do you bring them into this conversation? I think is what really is at the heart of narrative change and normative shifts.
Sure. So of course, access and agency is equal parts important when we're talking about ensuring all people, all stakeholders are part of the solution, and it's not a top down or a legislative or a policy change that is coming from somewhere else, right? But Bala, you work in different kinds of sectors in the social change space, right? How difficult is this listening, this active listening that we're talking, because it is too much, right? And it's very vast. So how are you making meaning of that, right? How are you trying to ensure that this is the one insight that I want to build a narrative on for my client in this particular space?
Thank you, Varsha. That's a great question. Before that, just a quick shout out for Civis. We got a chance to work with them. They're great. Really love their work, and more power to them. On listening, I cannot tell you how important this piece is, and we very rarely get it right. I think more and more we're learning that, to really be able to develop empathy for the audience that we're trying to reach and engage, it's so critical to design a process that puts those human beings at the center of it and really understand what a day in their life looks like before we sort of then come up with, okay, now this is the message and this is the medium, etc. And I think that design thinking principle of starting with empathy is something that we do not do enough. Also, because I don't think we've done a great job in educating our clients on the importance of it. Typically, we are in situations where our clients want to move things fast. They want insights fast, they want campaigns fast, they want results fast. I think one of the privileges we've had of making the shift from the corporate to majority development sector work is actually now being exposed to an audience that is more receptive to this thinking, because there is a greater understanding of the power of deep listening. I'm going to give you two examples. One is, as the Public Relations Consultancy Association of India, we've been putting together a series of masterclasses on how to deliver great campaigns. And as part of that, yesterday, actually, we had Josie Paul, who's the chairman of BBDO, talking about campaigns that have really sort of, started movements and shifted the needle. And one of them was called Touch the Pickle. It's very interesting because a lot of people have, tried to do campaigns around periods to break the taboos around it, etc. But, BBDO came up with Touch the Pickle as a response to getting women to be comfortable with talking about periods and talking about it publicly and making it a national conversation. And when we asked him, how did you come up with that insight about the fact that women are not allowed to touch the pickle at home when they're on periods, he said they have a research process and they have focus groups where they actually spoke to a lot of people about the different sort of things that they are subjected to when they go through periods. And it was in one of those conversations that this came out. So my takeaway from that was, you have to trust the process. You have to go through the process of listening, of engaging, and then you're muddling through till you find that one insight that feels like, aha, now that's really interesting. Why don't we go with this? And because it's going to, it really is something that is maybe not spoken about enough. Maybe it's something that resonates with a larger audience. And because it sort of has a double meaning, people will be curious about it, which is, okay, what exactly are they trying to say? So I think that's where I will bring in the power of good campaigns that are developed on deep listening. So that's one. Second, just very quickly, we were asked to promote solar rooftops as a national conversation in India. And of course, this is going to be an ongoing campaign for many years now. Um, this was one of the few instances in which we were actually able to impress upon the client that we needed to go and travel to each state, run focus groups with households to understand why they'd installed rooftop solars, why they didn't, and what would nudge them to if they hadn't yet. So again, I would bring this back to the importance of empathy, listening, research, and insights to then be able to create compelling narratives.
Great. Thank you, Bala. Yes, there is a deep connect of research, but research that is not clinical, rather very much seeped in the reality of people who are going through these real world issues, right? So there are questions also coming in. So I'm just going to put a couple of them together for you, Antara. One is when you have clients coming into you and they're looking at change communication, and impact communication to happen. How receptive are they, as Bala pointed out, bringing in, when you say we need to do research about this, we need to listen to this, how receptive are they to this? Or they come with their own set of their own impact metrics?
Somewhere in the middle, I would say, and it also depends very much client to client, who's on the other side. I wouldn't, in my experience, I've had like across the spectrum of where they land. But I think, like Girish said, also, like, we're seeing more and more that, especially in the social impact sector, we are seeing more people who are understanding that you can't just jump straight into it. You have to take a little bit of time, and you have to not just take a little bit of time at the beginning, but you have to keep it, has to be an ongoing process, and you have to course correct as you're going along. Because typically these campaigns, which when you're doing like change building, you wouldn't have the kind of budget that, like, a touch the pickle, like a Whisper, or a Stay Free kind of brand would have. Like, usually when you're working with an NGO, you are working on a shoestring budget, and you're trying to make something really big and seemingly impossible happen. So you have to be very nimble and very creative in how you're using that listening also on an ongoing basis. And I think, like, speaking from an agency perspective, since the question was about clients coming in, and that bit of tussle sometimes that happens, because internally we're like, this is how we want to do it, but then sometimes the client is like, no, this is how we want to do it. We've been in this space for this much time, we have a good understanding of the customer, we're telling you to go out and execute this thing. We want just your creative idea, and then we want you to go and execute, because we already know, we don't want to waste time on understanding the people who we are targeting. Yeah, I think it's always a bit of a balancing act. You have to keep both sides in consideration, but I do think that, like, the luxury of having 6 months of doing research, and then having a solid enough bank of research to then go forward with a campaign is not something a lot of, I mean, just to be real, it's not something a lot of clients can give you. So I think, like, very often you have to work some things in parallel. Like, while something is going on, you're still kind of starting on the execution, seeing what's working, seeing what's clicking, and then being sort of humble enough, and also kind of self-aware enough to know that, okay, this is not working, this is what changes we need to make, this is what has worked, how can we kind of build this further and expand it so that it's also not like repetitive. So yeah, that would kind of be my answer. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, definitely. This is the real world that we're talking about. There are real issues in terms of resources, limited resources, especially for impact and change communications. Sahana, I think Sonali has put up a question. Yes, you have a point. Sure, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to build on Antara's case. I have to say, my corporate work experience, my 1 month retainer is like an exorbitant amount. Like, I did, out of frustration when I was freelancing, I did a survey with 33 NGOs, out of which only five of them had a 5 lakh plus budget allocated for marketing and communications for the entire year. And these are small NGOs, okay? So it's such a good point that you brought up, Antara. How do you have to be creative when we come up with campaigns because of so many constraints? Yeah.
True. So I think that answers Sonali's question as well, that came about if budgets are allocated. They are, but with a lot of caveats, I presume. But kicking off from where Antara and you have shared, Sahana, we had very few instances, right? Like of campaigns like Man Ke Manjire or Bell Bajao, which talked about intimate partner violence and all of that, right? But in today's day and age, where we are bombarded, right, literally, with a lot of images, a lot of campaigns, a lot of space, mind space, everything is being occupied, right? How do you then stay authentic, insightful, and still ensure that the stakeholder that you wanted to reach to build the narrative, right, that you are seeking to happens, even if it is. Now, I'm going to give you the luxury of time. Maybe you don't have in real life, but if I give you the luxury of time, how do you make this happen? And like Antara said, even if you are like nimble footed, you have the resources, you have the time, but how do you ensure that you are able to stand out amidst the noise and still build your compelling narrative? What would be the top three things that you would, want people who are listening in to first do first? Anyone? Tantara, do you want to go?
Um, I'm not sure, sorry, but I'm not sure like I exactly understood the question. When you say what do you do first, I so usually what our process is that we would kind of try to understand the space, like the larger ecosystem around that particular cause or that particular NGO. Then you understand what exactly that NGO is doing and what is their differentiator in in that space. Because typically, like say if you take like a space like disability, right, there might be organizations that are working just with children with disability. There might be just livelihood, there might be just devices, assistive devices, etc. And I have a client called the Association of People with Disability, which is a Bangalore based organization that works across the spectrum. So they have what they call a life cycle approach, and then they're going right from when mothers are pregnant and they've noticed that there is some sort of abnormality in the fetus, right up to elderly people who are living with disability who might need different kinds of care, and they have interventions along the way for each of these people. So I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all process that I could really I'm at a bit of a loss as to how to define that process right now, because for us it is really personalized to what that particular organization is doing and who they want to speak to, and how are we going to tell their story in a simple and effective manner. It's very, very difficult most of the time. Most of the NGOs that I have worked with in the comm space are not doing just one thing. They're trying to do various things across the spectrum of even if they're like specialized in a particular area. So I think yeah, I really think it's really important to not just understand the client, but to understand the ecosystem in which we're functioning and tailor a communications approach very specific to what that particular organization needs.
So
Definitely, a
if I can,
contextualized approach is important. Yes, Sahana, please continue.
no, no. So I think it's not in any order, but some tenets that our organization keeps in mind when we look at communications is one, is it participative? I mean, or is it very one-sided? Do we have a narrative that we think we want to kind of promote? But it might be that, but how do we make it really participative? For example, Pratham Books runs a one-day, one-story competition, and it is a one-story campaign, and it's like zero budget. Okay, so they on 8th September, it's a Mother Tongue Day. They say everybody can be a reader, everybody can be a storyteller. They pick a book, and thousands of champions, reading champions, conduct these sessions across India. They send pictures and they tag. There's a common hashtag. Second, is there a specific call to action? Because brand building is one thing, but what do people do with knowing about something, right? So what is a call to action? So Jatka, which is another partner of ours, did a billboard that breathes campaign. So they put up these humongous lungs in like on Old Madras Road across different cities, and they there was an air quality index that was live. The lung went from white to black. They did a press conference outside a respiratory hospital in Delhi where they involved the respiratory department, pulmonologists, to do a press conference. Then they cut out these pieces of lungs, posted it to decision makers. to say, look, what is happening to people. So there's an active call to action. And also, how do we make it fun? This sector is so serious. Everybody's dying. Everybody's like suffering. So how do you make it fun? Like men are bad, like patriarchy is bad. So how do you really like be inclusive in your communication? Like we work on one of our portfolios is redefining masculinity, and it is a hard topic because it can be viewed as anti-feminist. Well, it is not. So we ran a small like of these shorts campaign where we asked people to say patriarchy in their mother tongue. We're so used to like dismantling patriarchy as such heavy words. How would you say it in Kannada or Malayalam? And then it became so light. Suddenly it was not like we're bashing this one sex, as opposed to, oh my god, like what does this really mean? So I think participative call to action and making it fun is something that we have to start kind of learning as well, or unlearning the opposite of it.
Yeah, definitely. I learned Pitrusakta. I think it's called in Hindi. Patriarchy is called that, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, contextualizing it, ensuring that it is participatory, making it fun, making it engaging is really important. Bala, you want to add on to what should be the must-dos if you have the luxury of time, resources?
Sure. So I think at a principal level, if we want to create movements, it's not about a social media strategy or a good intention. It's about breaking a stereotype, redefining a social mode, and bringing people together around a shared sense of purpose, belief, values, etc. And then, I think the good campaigns, what they do is they'll redefine something that is associated as a stereotype, like, always is like a girl, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, but just take something and give it new meaning. And that's a really nice way of sort of getting people to think about it in a new way, and then everything sort of flows from that. I think also, a few principles that I wanted to share from my learning is to be able to really sort of deliver compelling narratives. I think as consultancies, our responsibility is one, to ensure that our teams reflect the diversity that we are of thought, experience, to be able to therefore develop empathy for the audiences that we're trying to reach. That's number one. Second is, I think, as far as the relationship with the clients is concerned, that's really critical because there are two things that are important here. One is trust. Now, coming up with compelling narratives is not a time-bound thing. It may take 2 weeks, it may take 6 months, and being able to work with somebody who's giving you room to fail, because that's really important. And if you don't have that room to fail, you're not going to come up with something that's going to be sort of stand out. So I think that's where I would say there are these softer uh, sort of criteria that really comes into play when you want to do groundbreaking work. So it's really important that there's also a sort of a spirit of openness, transparency, trust, and which is hard because at the end of the day, there are limited budgets, there's limited time, and there are high expectations. So I think that's life.
Yeah, thank you, thanks, Bala. Yeah, and also, on the bit about inclusion in the sense of teams, the kind of having diverse, ensuring that your teams are diverse. Just coming from a space in Sahana shared, I am from Dream a Dream, and we have been working in this in education for the last 23 years. Our teams also have young people with whom we have worked, who have decided to join the social sector. So they are actually, in many ways, the people who are keeping us in check in terms of insights, in terms of enabling active listening to happen, right? And also to ensure that what we're putting out there, what we're sharing as insights, what we're sharing as narrative, comes from a space of lived realities, right? They are the young people who were disadvantaged, who became empowered through life skills, and then they're moving forward, right? And they are part of our teams as well. Vinod has asked a question here around NGOs are notorious for keeping minimal budget for a maximum impact, driving many a PR team to breaking point. Seems very heartfelt. I'm sorry about that, Vinod. How do you manage that? And does this factor mental health of the teams working for them at any point? Anyone wants to? Sahana, do you want to take this?
Yeah, Vinod, I totally agree. It's definitely a factor of deep frustration, but there is growing cognizance. I think in the last 6 years that I have worked in the sector, I can say that things are changing and changing thanks to agencies and consultants like On Purpose, like Antara, who are kind of focusing on this sector, because typically agencies or any sort of support systems were catering to the well-paid corporate sector. I think there is also a growing conversation among funders about the importance of storytelling. So, like my philanthropy that I represent, we give unrestricted grants, which allows for organizations to use it for communications. There are lots of organizations offering communication capability building. There are agencies like Terra Generation that works in the climate narrative building space. There is Chambal Media, Chambal Academy, which is Kabarlaria's organization, who conduct these storytelling 101 sessions in Hindi, in very local languages and very contextual. And the growth of AI generative, a lot of these apps that allow for people to not be dependent on high budget designers or such things. But I think there is definitely more funders have to be open to the idea that storytelling is important. So that is one. Talent needs to be paid better, because obviously this was not viewed as an important department in itself, but those things are changing. And I think the people now, even founders, are appreciating the value of having a good comms team, like Dream as a PhD who heads their communications and narrative building, which is really, really good, right? Because that shows that veteran, like 20 odd years of old organizations like Dream are leading the space here, and younger organizations and founders are natural storytellers. So I think there's a positive change. Definitely, the whole sector sometimes might be at breaking points at different point in time, but I think there's growing cognizance of it. It's a positive change.
Yes. I think Sahana, you answered that very well. Antara, yes, please add.
Just to add a little bit, I think Sahana captured it really well. I think, I think from both sides, the agency and the client need to see it as a partnership. And I've seen the difference it makes when the NGO, or, typically it's an NGO when we're talking about, this kind of, narrative change building. If they see the agency as a vendor, that we are paying you this much, we want to see this much, there is a sense of tension of, we're working against each other almost, where you feel like the client is never going to be happy with me. I always have to this thing. And to the point of mental health of the team that's executing on this, in those situations it becomes very hard, because it feels like there's always like this whip getting cracked, where you just have to keep delivering and delivering and delivering, and nothing is ever enough. But there are so many clients also who treat the agency as a partner, and who are saying that, like, with you we will grow it this way and in this direction. And that is when the agency feels empowered to suggest ideas and say, we know maybe we were thinking of doing it this way, but can we do it another way? And that's my earlier point of being a little bit more nimble, and being a little bit more creative, and not sticking just to these deliverables in this budget. Sometimes with that smaller shoestring budget, you can do one big thing that is way more impactful than doing 10 small things. But it requires that open-mindedness and communication and trust. I think even Girish brought that up, which is that trust between the two parties, and not feeling like y'all are at loggerheads with each other, but that like y'all are working together towards this cause. I think then the budget becomes a constraint, but not the defining, sort of like foundation on which we're running everything.
Yeah, Bala, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, just very quickly coming in, I think really love the fact that we've got these diverse perspectives on this panel. And, just picking up on what Sahana said in terms of unrestricted funding, so we work with Dasra, and, they work a lot in this sector. And one of the things that they've been talking about is the need to not just fund the NGOs with program budgets, but also institutional capacity building. I think that goes back to Sana's point about sort of unrestricted funding, which is so important in lots of different ways. I wonder if we need to have a similar approach to storytelling for this sector, which is at the end of the day, what we have realized in 6 years of doing this is that the development sector is completely underserved with good storytelling capabilities. And we also struggle with it in terms of building the capacity of our people and our teams to be able to sensitize them and upskill and upgrade them. It's just a question here, and this is not just for you, Sahana, but for, I guess, for the sector. Do we need to also treat our communications partners with a similar approach, which is rather than just funding the programs that we're running with them, actually look at building the storytelling capability of the sector?
Yeah, for sure. And I think funders are waking up to this cause. I think AT Chandra runs a capacity building initiative. Edelgive, which runs the Grow initiative, has an entire storytelling capacity building course. We have offered our partners a storytelling grant, an extension of existing grants, so that a certain budget, so that they can just start with like maybe basic videos, maybe hire a good communications consultant. We also provide these modules of courses that Chambal Academy offers, that Terra Generation offers. We sometimes underwrite if partner events, So I think funders have a very, very important role. I totally agree with it. We also need to work with partners like both of you to say that, I actively connect as many people as possible with On Purpose. And now I'll also connect to you, Antara, to say that, if there are people with this expertise, and talk to them, because, On Purpose runs this one free consulting initiative that you run, Bala, which you might want to talk about, which he runs every year, where they consult with these with one particular CSO and handhold them over the year, over a certain period of time. So I think there's a call to action to say this community, this communications fraternity of partners, of agencies, of funders, of NGOs need to come together. Even the corporate sector, there needn't be a bridge that we are corporate comms versus impact comms, right? We are all telling our story. So how do we kind of come together, learn, share more?
Yeah, so just to a quick to what Bala and you've shared, Sana, it's obviously changing. You've seen with unrestricted funds coming in, comms budgets actually being fixed along with the program budgets. So direct impact implementation budgets along with that comms budgets are also being fixed. But you're right when you're saying that we need to actually be looking at how are we putting our stories across, so that a social impact actually happens at a greater scale, and there is much more investment happening from all stakeholders, right? When a impactful story goes out, it is bound to bring a lot of the diverse stakeholders together, to work together. Let's just take in one of the questions. I don't know who wants to take this. You can let me know. How do you think that in the age of social media, how easy or difficult it is for PR professionals to narrate the story and handle the counter parallel narrative and do the damage control if it occurs and build a brand story? Antara, do you want to go? Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to take this question because I think this is something that I've faced very often in my work. I think there's a healthy balance of having blinkers on and listening to what's going on outside as well. I think in the world that we live in, and I think the social media especially is a place for two-way conversation, right? The whole reason why social media works is that we want to engage with people and people can engage with us unfiltered. So we might have disgruntled ex-employees posting about how this organization is terrible, or we might have somebody else talking about another bad experience, or whatever it might be. I think it's very important to be cognizant and have like an ORM sort of process in place for like if this kind of thing happens, this is how we respond or not respond, so that you remain unfazed by certain things, and then knowing exactly what to flag and what to take beyond that, like what do you take cognizance of and what do you kind of just know how to respond to in a kind of process way that everybody is on the same page as. I think you actually have to tap into the fact that people are, wanting to communicate with you, and use it to your advantage, and not be too phased by the. There's always going to be negative commentary coming in, on social media. You really can't avoid it. I mean, especially like the bigger an organization gets, the more common it is for something like that to happen. So you can't let that prevent like you from going on and like the journey that you're going on. So yeah, that's that's sort of what just wanted to say. Setting the right processes to deal with it, and not taking it too personally when it does get a little bit out of control, which it invariably will sometimes.
Yeah. So yeah, impact communications also face crisis of different kinds, and there is a damage control aspect that has to be built in. And yes, Bala or Sahana, do you want to add, or are there any views on this particular, on how do we handle damage control of diverse narratives that may
No,
come in?
I think Antara covered it quite well.
Okay. Bala, do you want to add?
Um, I'm going to link it to one of the questions that's also coming about, Tanishq, for example, falling
Yeah.
flat, and how do you handle a situation like that? Um, it's not easy, and I think again it comes down to who are the stakeholders for what we're trying to do. Is it the business? Is it the people? Is it the shareholders? And I think that will define a lot how people will take a stand. Now, for example, with Tanishq, I think it was really sad that they had to roll it back, because if you're trying to make change, then you have to take a stand and you've got to stick with it. And you've got to stick with it. And of course, it's easy. It's easy for us to say that. I'm sure it was very tough for the brand manager sitting there, getting calls from the board saying what's going on, etc. I'm sure that wasn't easy for them. But I'm gonna share 5 principles that I've just written down on what it takes to sort of create a movement. The first is courage, to break a stereotype and to stick by what you've put out, and also to get the backing of your company and your bosses to stand behind you. Otherwise, don't do it. Second, compassion, to be able to listen. Third, curiosity, to go beyond the obvious. Fourth, consistency. Brands are built over time, so don't just expect one campaign to sort of do the job. You've got to do it repeatedly, year after year. And then finally, I think one of the points that Sana had made about was the call to action. Having a very clear call to action in all our campaigns, so that we're getting people to become involved in what we're doing, not just consume what we're saying.
Yeah, definitely in the sense of having the courage, because I think we are in the space of impact communications because we have the courage and the organization that is working on a particular social change aspect is also there because of that, right? There is another question Tarunjit has asked. Can we share any real life crisis communication that we have handled in the sector? What and how did you change the narrative? In what manner? Bala, you want to go?
Okay, it's not a crisis situation, but it's something that I'm very, very proud of. We did some work with Breakthrough, a few years ago, and it was around sort of just raising more awareness about ending gender discrimination. And the premise being that the current narrative in Indian popular cinema normalizes the idea that a woman is a man's property and must be subject to his wishes. And it's really ironic that every movie scene that involves smoking or drinking alcohol, which are not criminal offenses, displays statutory warnings as against the scenes of violence against women. So we partnered with Breakthrough to set up a petition as an open letter seeking, organizational and institutional support, requesting the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting and the Central Board of Film Certification to take action in identifying scenes of gender violence and calling them out with warnings and disclaimers. And we're really excited because we managed to get Tapsi Pannu, we got Rajkumar Rao, and I think another 2, 3 more celebrities involved in that. And we got a few lakh of signatories to that petition. I can tell you that it's not been institutionalized as yet, but I've started seeing it in some of at least the Kerala Film Certification Board now. At the start of the film, you will see that gender violence is unacceptable. It comes out. So I'm very pleased about that. I think there's a lot more room to go, but very proud of that.
Yes, I've seen that in the Malayalam film industry. They do put that line. So that kudos to you on that, and for to on purpose on that. Sahana, Antara, do you want to also share any real life crisis communication that you have managed to, circumvent?
I'll quickly share something. So one of our partners, because we also support them as an extended team, work in youth, adolescent, in the adolescent space, right? And they had tied up with the local government as for curriculum, what was called the gender transformation curriculum. It's actually gender sensitivity, but the problem with Indian language and all the jargons that we use, it can have different interpretations. And so they put out this update on Twitter and all the other platforms saying we've tied up with the government for this gender transformation program. And quickly it went like, there was just too many comments on, are you trying to change the gender? What does gender transformation mean? Are you making a boy a girl? It quickly went down that road, and it was quite frightening because there are sectors that feel strongly about this kind of people who strong. And I mean, there's a cultural aspect to it. And they really went cold feet. But what they did was they did not react immediately. They connected with their key stakeholder, in this case, the local education department, to say, hey, we put this out. We have an MOU. You know our work. Do you think we need to pull it back? And the government said, it's okay. We know what you're doing. It's a gender sensitivity. It's around sexual health, reproductive health, and, understanding consent. So it's fine. Like, just ignore it. So they actually then just let it be. It did take around 24, 48 hours, but they let it be. Sometimes, that identifying who your key stakeholder is and kind of asking them, do you think this is going to have repercussions, is probably one way, because there's no, like Antara said, sometimes you have to just do what you're doing and not you can't have, not everyone's going to be okay with what you're doing. And that can be an intention.
Yeah, definitely. We can choose what we want to respond to and the manner in which we want to, right? Sometimes silence works really best. Antara, do you want to close in with your own real life crisis communication?
Not really. I would say I'm fairly lucky to have had mostly minor crises that we've dealt with fairly quickly. So I don't really think, since we have just 2 or 3 minutes left, I think we can move on.
Yeah. Okay. So not crisis communication, but I'd like to share something as well, because we've been in the space of ensuring young people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, live empowered, amazing lives. But as we are going along, we realize that while we are empowering young people, the system remains the same, right? And which is pretty much stacked against our young people. So even as we are empowering young people, it is equally important for us to look at the systemic change, right? The system needs to change, wherein how is the system looking at these young people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, and how are they themselves looking at their own journeys? More often than not, they feel that their journeys are not successful because of the way we have, in many ways, looked at branding what success means, right? Especially in the education system, which is about marks, which is about merit, which is about material wealth as you go along the way, right? And our young people are looking at it that way. So for us right now, it's not crisis communication, but it is urgent communication required, in the sense of curating diverse definitions of what success itself means. Today, if I ask each one of you, success would mean definitely different, far away from what we were taught in school about first rank and, cent percentage, all of that, right? It's very different. Why don't we do that with our young people in the education system, right? Why are we limiting the way they are looking at thriving for themselves? That is one narrative that we are building, and I'm not saying we've handled it already. We are working towards it. It is something that we are curating with a whole lot of people. Lastly, since we have to wrap this up, any key takeaways that listeners, people, professionals who are PR professionals who are listening to us, that they can take away briefly, each one of you, on building narratives that are authentic, evocative, and that can actually change, make change happen on the ground? Starting with you, Antara.
I think the answer is a bit longer than the 10 seconds that I have. But I would say I think a lot of what Girish said earlier, about having courage, having that curiosity, and I think also the building that sort of safe environment where people feel like they can experiment, they can suggest ideas, they can even fail sometimes to be able to succeed the next time. And I think also very often for many of us, and I've seen this in many of my teams as well, is that little bit of wanting that recognition for a job well done. So when you actually have a great idea, when you run with it, when it is a success, I think getting that internal validation, external validation is really important, because you need to fuel you need some fuel in the tank to keep going, because this is I think the industry we're in is very non-stop, right? Like, you're done with one thing, you're going on to another thing. There's many things going on in parallel. So I think all of us need to be able to take a step back once in a while and say, we've done well. So yeah.
Yes, celebrate, take a pause, celebrate your successes, be in the moment as well. Yes, very important. Thank you, Antara. Sahana?
Yeah, I think that was a really nice summary, Antara. I think my takeaway is that there's so much each of us have such rich experiences. So how do we platforms like PRPOI is doing this incredible job of bridging these different kind of departments. Maybe I'm representing the funder, maybe somebody is representing an NGO, and then there are agencies. So how do we really bring all of us together on common platforms to learn and share? And how do we build this media, also get media fraternity interested in the sector a little bit more than what it is, because most of the media coverage is dedicated to the corporate, the business world. But I think just having these conversations, sharing our experiences is very powerful. So more power to that, and hopefully more such conversations happen and we'll stay engaged. So that's my takeaway.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Sahana. Yes, we definitely need media to be advocates for all the change that we are working towards. And last but not the least, Bala, you want to close this?
So really like what Sahana and Antara have said. I would say along with celebrating, the work we're doing, the progress we're making, I would also say that we also have a responsibility to start from a place of acknowledgement that we as communicators have, we wield a really powerful craft, and we must respect that this is a very powerful profession that has the potential to really change narratives. And it's only when we recognize this privilege that we can then sort of be able to apply ourselves accordingly. And the second thing I would say that I've learned in 6 years of On Purpose is sometimes there is no magnificent strategy, but it's just a series of small steps that together could build change.
True, yes, incremental progress always, and that's how impact communications works. So thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Antara. Thank you, Sahana. Thank you, Bala, for all the insights. I really loved having this conversation. I think we can have part 2, part 3. This is for PRPOI to take note. And yeah, that's all from us. If you have any questions, please continue posting. We will come and we will write our insights, our feedback, and our comments shortly. But stay tuned for the next episode of on PRPOI, which will be on a very relevant topic, I'm sure. So thank you so much. Firstly, also thank you to the platform for giving us this space to share and to learn. That's all from us. Have a great weekend, everyone.